All right, let's move to the story now. Today marks 100 years of women in law in South Africa. On this day in 1923, the Women Legal Practitioners Act was promulgated. A special event has been underway in Pretoria this afternoon, paying tribute to women in law over the past 100 years. Receiving special honours was Desiree Fintka, the first African woman admitted as an attorney in 1967. And today, of course, we have many judges and advocates in our legal system. Our Deputy Judge President is female. However, there's still some way to go for true equality. And I'm joined now by advocate Michelle le Roux. She's a senior counsel, law professor, and an initiator of the 100 More campaign. Thank you so much for joining us in studio. Tell us a little bit more about this event today. Why was it so significant?
Well, what the 100 More campaign is a campaign that's trying to mark the centenary of the Women Legal Practitioners Act. It was passed on it was passed earlier and came into force on the 10th of April, which was Easter Monday. And one of the ways that the campaign is celebrating this very important moment is with ceremonial sittings in the courts. So Northwest and the Western Cape had their sittings last week. Today we had sittings in Pretoria, Johannesburg and Pietermaritzburg. And in different ways, the judiciary, with the magistracy, was celebrating 100 years. So, for example, in the Pretoria sitting, it was framed as a rehearing of the applications for admission by women where they were denied because they were women. And there were speeches and representatives from across the legal sector, all the different institutions and organizations that make up the legal sector and the practice of law in particular. So advocates, attorneys, and the judiciary and the magistrates marked the moment at ceremonial sittings in court. The guests of honor were, most importantly, Ms. Desiree Fintka, the first female black attorney who was admitted into the then Transvaal. But even her story, she was only admitted in 1967. Yet from 1923, women were granted access to the profession. We had family members of the Wookie and Schlesland families who were also, they were the women whose cases were denied by the male judges who said, women must stay at home, law is for men, this is not where we want to see women.
Look, things have changed a lot in the last 100 years. But, you know, I think back to the incident where you were told to shut up. You know, I'm not going to forget that easily, that you were told that by fellow advocate Dalian Mpofu. He, of course, this was at the State Capture Commission. You were representing Pravin Gordon. He, of course, was sanctioned for that. Do you view that as a sexist act, or was that just plain rudeness? I mean, you know, it's important, I think, as women to say when something is seen as a sexist act and when it's just someone being out of order.
Well, I think what was interesting about that experience, there were many things that were interesting about that experience, but two things to highlight. The one is that female colleagues immediately understood that there was a gender dynamic to it that male colleagues didn't necessarily appreciate. Members of the public sometimes saw it through a gendered lens. There was obviously no gendered language used. Yeah. But it was something that certainly the reaction to it, some people saw it through a gendered lens. The one part of that, but unfortunately it's not just that incident, it's unfortunately a common feature for those of us who are advocates in particular, so we're the ones who stand up in court and argue, is you know, the abuse that we get on gender grounds, so rape threats. You know, I also get marriage proposals, so swings and roundabouts. But you know, I don't think my male colleagues go through some of that. And so you know, the legal profession has been a boys' club. That's what we were marking and celebrating today in the courts in Gauteng and KZN. We've come a very, very long way. We have further to go, but there is reason for enormous hope because we graduate more female law graduates. Women come into the profession, we see them flourish, and it's a profession that rewards seniority and experience. You can't fast-track judgment and skill, you learn it incrementally. And if you look at the profession now, it might be that, you know, I might be the only woman who addresses the court in a particular hearing, but certainly the juniors, there are a lot of women present, and it's only a matter of time, a matter of a mere number of years before they are senior counsel and leading the teams and on their feet. And that's what we were celebrating, and that's what the campaign is looking to mark going forward. So
Mandisa Maya, she of course was head of the Supreme Court of Appeal. She's now Deputy Judge President.
Deputy Chief Justice.
Deputy Chief Justice, sorry. But I mean, that was significant. Of course, she was vying for that top job, but it is very significant, is it not, to have those examples being set. We do see that we've got a lot of female judges. We're still not sort of on a 50-50 equality level yet, are we?
No, we're not, but certainly we are so much better than we were in 1994 or any point previously. So, you know, the one thing that was celebrated today, and it's a list that just starts in Gauteng, 1995 with Justice Lucy Mailula was, you know, the first judge appointed into the High Court as a woman. 1995, it had to be after the end of apartheid. And then, you know, what's fantastic is the list is now getting longer and longer every year, and that's to be encouraged. The other point I think that is very important to stress is that women aren't being appointed because they're women. Gender transformation, like race transformation, is a very important imperative, and we take it very seriously, and it's necessary to contextualize people's different experiences and when they apply to become judges. But, you know, women are there on merit. They are there because they have done the job. They have the skill, they have the talent, and, you know, we're just harnessing the other 50% of the population to serve in the judicial positions. I mean, Ruth Bader Ginsburg, one of my heroes, the US Supreme Court Justice, she was once asked, you know, when will there be equality on the Supreme Court? And she said, when there are 9.
Talk to me about, you know, you're saying it's not about saying giving women a chance because women are equally skilled. But do women have equal chances in South Africa yet? I mean, you sort of alluded to sexism in some form, but do women in the legal profession in this country still have barriers to entry?
Absolutely. I think, like women in every profession in the world, as we change from, you know, being only present in traditionally gendered professions and roles and jobs to the opportunities that exist across the board. So there certainly, I mean, there absolutely is sexism. There is, you know, obviously black women suffer even greater disadvantage. But it's all about, if you think about the legal profession, there are 2 aspects to why you would pick a particular lawyer to be your lawyer, right? A particular attorney or advocate. The one is their knowledge of the law, their skill in the law, and all the rest. And there's no reason to doubt that women, if we look at who we graduate, can absolutely comprehend, understand, and learn the law. The other part is the trust and confidence in someone who doesn't look like you expect a lawyer to look. And that's where we still have a long way to go. So the fact that women present differently, they have a different voice, they you know, may make arguments in a different way, they, you know, the talent and the skill is the same, but your ear needs to tune into it. So I think about it in terms of accents in court. You know, someone, an advocate could stand up with a heavy accent and you have to tune in and understand it. Once you listen, you just go, this person knows what they're doing, and I trust them with my case. But it's getting people to take that opportunity as opposed to going with what they feel more comfortable with. Fortunately, certainly in the last few decades, we've seen so many trailblazers, so many women that have broken those glass ceilings and led the way for other women. So if you look at who do appear in courts now, who are the briefing attorneys, and who are sitting on the bench having come out of practice, you see that there are just trailblazers everywhere, and that's what we were celebrating and marking.
Of course, nowadays, women's rights, it's still as important as it ever was. But also we're looking at transgender rights. I mean, do we as yet have a transgender lawyer in this country?
Oh, absolutely. We have a few.
And how is that accepted? Because I think that's perhaps the new frontier.
Absolutely. And, you know, certainly the campaign is celebrating all women. But, for example, I know there is a directive that was issued in Johannesburg High Court. I think it was it was the Johannesburg High Court, where counsel, in our practice notes, which is what we file before you go to court, it's a summary of issues and, you know, sets out who are the counsel in the case. If you wish to advise the judge about which pronouns you prefer to be addressed with, you now put it in your practice note. So the judiciary is transforming, you know, to absolutely, you know, promote trans rights as well, absolutely, to be more inclusive. So there are several attorneys and advocates that I can think of, and, you know, hopefully those kind of practices will go into the other courts as well.
And just as there were, not so much now, but there were problems with, you know, people not accepting women in the legal system, is that the new point of conflict, where there's a sort of, oh, what is this pronoun nonsense? You know, there's this sort of old school attitude about it. Is that prevalent in legal circles today still?
I'm sure, you know, the legal profession is not apart from society, so I'm sure there is enormous amounts of prejudice and bias that we would expect. I can only, in my very limited, privileged world, say that I see, you know, indicators like people's email signatures contain their pronouns now, you know, the practice direction that I referred to. So certainly, you know, in the very rarefied air that I live in, there is an acceptance and an acknowledgement of this. But it's something that certainly the profession needs to be vigilant about, needs to take seriously, the same way we have all sorts of, you know, anti-sexual harassment policies, inclusion policies, diversity programs. You know, those are absolutely necessary, not just for gender issues, but for, you know, the full range of our diversity in this country.
Yeah, I mean, we're making strides in the legal profession, but if you think of the GBV problem in this country, it is a very disheartening situation that we're dealing with, isn't it?
Absolutely. And that's why, you know, lawyers, we are often the butt of all the jokes. But I think lawyers are also, because of our constitution, because of the way our legal system works, and the way that oftentimes, because politics has failed to deliver results, people turn to the courts. And turning to a legal profession that reflects you, that represents you, that, you know, where your attorney or advocate look like you, and go to court and appear in front of a judge who looks like you, that really matters. And that's why transformation matters. And that's what we've been trying to celebrate.
Well, wonderful. 100 years of women in law. Here's to at least another 100 more. Thank you so much for your time this evening. That was Advocate Michelle le Roux. She's Senior Counsel, Law Professor, and an initiator of the 100 More campaign.